So, what exactly do we mean here by technical leader? Hi, everyone. We're here today with Sergio again to talk today about what makes for a great technical leader. For those of you who aren't already familiar with Exponent, Exponent helps you get your dream tech career with our online courses, expert coaching, peer-to-peer mock interviewing platform, and interview question database. Check it out at tryexponent.com. Okay, thank you so much for being here with us today, Sergio. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this topic. It's a really important one. Could you quickly introduce yourself again for our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Sergio Cruz, and I am a software engineering director. Currently work at Ramsey Solutions, where I lead a couple of product teams, and I do have a couple of technical leads in my teams, and I'm super stoked to be talking about this today.
Yeah, awesome. It sounds like you're the perfect person to talk about this topic. So, to get started, I thought we could try to be a little bit more specific. So, what exactly do we mean here by technical leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've observed was this. Here's how my career trajectory was like. I started out as an engineer, right? Did full stack work. Then I decided that front end was really what I liked, and then I decided that that wasn't enough, and I had to do full stack work again. But then eventually, it got to a point where I had more experience and I was ready to take on some more responsibilities. So I was given this role of a tech lead. And I feel like that's a pretty common path that a lot of engineers go through, right? You start out as uh, a just an individual contributor, and then eventually you take on a little bit more responsibilities. Now, it's interesting because in different companies and different settings, tech lead means different things. What I have been observing in the industry lately, and what's been most common, is this concept of a product trio. Are you familiar with that, Angie? Have you heard of a product trio before?
I haven't actually, so I'd love to hear more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marty Kagan, he owns a company called the Silicon Valley Product Group, SVPG, and he has a couple of books where he dives deep into the concept of the product trio. A couple of other product authors do as well. Um, but essentially, a product trio is composed by a product manager, a product designer, and then third, a tech lead. Now, the underlying assumption is there's a squad, right, or a team. Typically, we call it a product squad, which is a cross functional squad with all these different roles represented in them. Typically, five or so engineers, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, right? So it gets to a point where if everyone is calling the shots and doing all the things and owning discovery, it gets pretty messy. So the product trio was a way that uh, folks identified to, okay, how do we clean this up a little bit? How do we have a little bit of like a pseudo leadership within the squad so that the subgroup can set some direction, right? So um, it's not formal leadership, if you will, technically. I mean, sometimes I've seen companies do that, but typically it's more so owning the technology and leading the technology, but not the people, right? Like you don't have people reporting to you. Now you might, again, some companies have done that, but what I've seen the most classic way is you're more so you're a senior developer by now, right? And you're owning the direction of the technology and working really closely with those other roles, the designer, that product designer, and the product manager.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like a separation of duties type of deal, right? And
Mhm.
so, if that's the case, then the senior engineer or the technical lead, what is their main responsibility?
Yeah, 100%. So the number one thing that they own is feasibility. What do we mean by feasibility, right? They're answering the question, is it possible, right? So um, uh, every now and again, you have a product manager or a designer come up with some really crazy concept, right? And it's up to the engineer to make that possible or even answer the question, is it possible, right? Now, a lot of times it's, hey, can we build this mobile app? Can we build this interesting concept on the web, right? Every now and again, and Elon Musk will come up and will ask you, "Can you build a rocket?" Right? But somebody's got to answer that question, right? Is it even possible? So within a product squad, the tech lead is doing discovery and architecture work to figure out, what are some experiments that we can do along the way to objectively answer the question: Is it feasible? Can we do this within the constraints that we have? Team size, budget, right? How long it would take, and things like that. So it's that constant negotiation that happens, right? Of what is the best possible way to solve this problem.
Yeah, so essentially it's like you're balancing over engineering with under engineering, right? And also trying to consider many different aspects that would inform that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It becomes very diverse. One of the things I love about tech leads as well, when done right, is they communicate and collaborate with stakeholders a lot, right? So, um, hey, what are some of the key business challenges that are happening now? And how can technology be part of that answer, and how can we do it? How can we solve it in a way that, every now and again, an earlier stage company, right, might just be trying to prove out a concept. So speed, and how inexpensive it is tends to be the main thing that they're going for, right? A more well-established company, they might be thinking more of scale. Like, hey, this has been working with 100,000 people, but when a million people, like when we 10x this to 1 million users, will this still behave appropriately, right? So again, so just having that good relationship with your stakeholders and understanding the overall context is huge in identifying the feasibility question, right? That answering, is it possible? Can we do this?
Yeah, and it really sounds like that's an immense amount of complexity to manage, right? Between managing both the stakeholders and the other engineers on their team. I was kind of wondering then, how do you make sure that the team is resilient and doesn't become vulnerable to like single points of failure?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I mean, there's so many ways that you can go about solving that problem, right? But the main thing that you want is to have good practices around documentation and everything. What you want is this: you don't want um, single points of failure, like especially when it comes to people, right? So it's, gosh, anybody who's been an engineer for a long time, especially in the squad, there's always, it always starts out a little bit innocent, where it's like, hey, so and so, there's one person, can you build this feature? And then it becomes, hey, since you built this feature, can you extend this feature by adding something else? But we're all busy here doing something else, right? Then it becomes, hey, there's a bug. And since you're the one responsible, since you've been the one who's built all of this, can you now fix this bug? And it starts out again, it's a very innocent thing, right? 1 week will go by, 2 weeks will go by. Next thing you know, 6 months goes by. One engineer is the only person who is familiar with that area of the code or that feature. And now you just can't move forward without that engineer, right? It's not a fun place for them to be. It's a little flattering, to know that everyone relies on you for things, but at the same time, it doesn't become collaborative, right? There's that whole hit by a bus factor, that people talk about. If one person gets hit by a bus, by the way, I don't know where that expression comes from. I mean, having English having English as my second language, sometimes I built these I paint these pictures in my mind. I'm like, being hit by a bus. How often does that happen? But anyway, if it were to happen, which is unlikely, would we be in trouble? Like, how can we make sure that the team is working cohesively, right? So we don't have those single points of failure, right? So that we're all working towards the same thing.
Yeah, and I imagine like you don't want a huge amount of tribal knowledge to build up, right? That is neither good for the resilience of the team nor for having open communication.
Yeah. So it's interesting because tribal knowledge is actually good when it's fairly spread out and the decisions have been properly documented, right? So if there's a group of people who are responsible for it and they have a good track record, like one of the ways that my team, for example, does that right now, we use Jira and we use GitHub. And every time we make a pull request, we have a little connection between our Jira and our GitHub. So the title on the pull request is it always starts with the ticket number, right? And then some, colon and then some description of what it is that we're trying to achieve here with this pull request, right? And what's awesome about that is when you go to any of the code bases that my team owns and you read through the commits, typically when you merge a PR, we're squashing that commit, we're squashing all those commits into a single one. You have this clean list of all of these tickets that engineers worked on. And we tend to be pretty good at documenting what was the context around the feature on Jira itself, right? So if there are any designs, hopefully they're linked on that Jira board and everything. So that's the kind of thing those are the kinds of processes that a tech lead can help introduce that gives you that track record, like what has happened here, what has informed some of these decisions, right? So like if there's an area of code where it's a little bit tricky, like hey, what's going on here, you could even do a git blame and be linked directly into that ticket, right, on Jira or whatever project management tool that you're using. That gives you that context, that gives you the screenshots, that gives you, all the comments going back and forth on decisions that we were making. So it's an easy way to document things. It's not the only way you document it, but it's one of the ways that, again, having that track record and having a group of folks collaborate around that, if that's the kind of tribal knowledge we're talking about, Angie, I'm totally cool with that. Like I want the team being familiar with it, but it's all one person and they don't document the decisions that they made or the whys or anything, and it's not ticketed, or there's no way that you can correlate, again, a commit or a pull request back to a work request, right? Be it through a ticket or something like that. And it becomes all about like what's in their head. And now when you hire a second engineer, right, or when a different engineer from a different part of the company moves to your team and they don't even know where to start, then it's just not scalable. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the company. It's not good for the team. It's not healthy, and we're really trying to establish a healthy environment here.
Right. Yeah. And what I really like about the Jira GitHub system that you mentioned is that it's like this really easy, clear, and automated way of clearly communicating historical context so that you don't have that single engineer who knows everything and like nobody else knows what's going on. And so it seems like at the crux of all of this is having clear communication, right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what you would have to say about like what types of communication and expectation setting a great technical leader should have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So by the time an engineer becomes a tech lead for the first time, uh, they spent a few years learning what it's like to be an engineer, right? And by now you know that the hard skills you've picked up along the way are crucial. But they alone won't do, right? You need to pick up some soft skills. Some people like to call them human skills, right? To keep helping you move forward in your career. And good communication and good expectation setting is one of those skills that inevitably you need to be not just a good tech lead, but a good professional. I think I've observed this in most career paths, even outside of engineering. It gets to a point where it goes a little bit beyond just the work that you do, right? Your work starts impacting people around you, and being able to relate with others and work collaboratively is so important, right? So again, we love talking about accountability, right? Like we make decisions and we want to keep each other accountable so that we all know we're moving in the same direction. But accountability, my CTO of the company I work, he talks a lot about this, and I absolutely agree. He always says accountability starts with setting expectations. You can't keep someone accountable if you didn't communicate out loud the thing that you're expecting them to do. It's so important to communicate clearly and to set expectations so that you can keep people accountable, so that we can all agree on, okay, well, what is the time frame of this thing? Is this the right time to uh, uh, make turn this into a really scalable solution, or is this still a proof of concept where we're okay with a more scrappy solution, right? But saying those things out loud and agreeing on them is an undervalued skill. It sounds like common sense, but it again, I see a lot of people just not realize the importance of this, and it becomes such a pitfall, where a team is now not healthy because the lines of communication are not open.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. And I really like what you said about accountability and making the expectations super clear. And I think that a lot of this for a technical lead is about both taking ownership and also helping the rest of your team take ownership over your product as well. So I'm curious to hear like what you have to say about that and like how do you take ownership?
I remember when I approached one of my engineers once, and I told them, um, I want you to become a tech lead over your squad. You've been performing great. And at the time, I had been acting as a tech lead over the squad, but I also had 30 other jobs that I owned, and it just wasn't healthy anymore. And I needed to
Right.
delegate that out to someone, right?
That's a lot.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense anymore. And I told them this. I said, "No, here's what I want you to do. I want you to own and lead the technology." That's what I mean by tech lead, right? A technical leader. Um, Lead the technology, set the direction that you want the technology to go in. I don't need you necessarily to lead the people. They'll still report to me. We'll work in partnership, but I do need you to understand that the technology is built by people, right? So that distinction is crucial, right? But hey, when there's a problem, um, I need you as the tech lead to own it. So, what does that look like in practice? Um, and how does it work with technology being owned or being built by people? Well, number one, monitoring. We need to know what's happening, especially if you're working in a web environment. If you got APIs that you own, when they start being overloaded, maybe you need to start scaling things horizontally a little bit. If you're waiting for me as your leader to prompt you to do something about it because alarms are going off everywhere, you're not going to make for a great tech lead, right? That's what I mean by ownership.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I also thought it was interesting what you said before about how products are built by people and also for people, right? So it sounds like an important part of this ownership and also communication in general is being able to understand like the emotions and reactions of others, especially in this product context. So I'm curious, like how you like what advice you have for technical leaders on this aspect of communication.
Well, I think we need a lot of empathy. I think we need empathy, So, as a tech lead, I was talking about ownership a minute ago, and you can't, and again, communication expectation settings. Um, as the ultimate owner of that piece of the technology, it's totally okay for you to say, hey, as an example, if there's an alert, right, if there's a server that goes down or something like that, it's totally fine for you to get alerted by it and other people of the team to get alerted by it, right? But ultimately, I, as your leader, I'm keeping you accountable. Now, if somebody else jumped on it fast and they saw, like, I have no issues with that at all. Um, but that's where empathy comes in, right? Like, now you as the leader, you need to set that expectation, right? That tech lead, again, it's built by people. It's also monitored by people. You need to be clear on setting that expectation as well. Like, hey, maybe we'll have on-call schedules, right? And maybe if there's 5 people in a team, maybe a night and a half a week or so, every couple of nights we change who's on call. You guys can agree on that. No big deal whatsoever, but it all starts with that um, open line of communication and properly setting those expectations. But again, why is empathy important here? Um, on the people who produce that technology, right? Um, you just need to know they can't read your mind. You have to say things out loud and agree on them. It's in your head, it might be common sense. In their head, it's not, right? And chances are, I'm making you the tech lead. There may be someone who's as experienced or perhaps even a little bit more experienced than you in the team. Most of the time, people will have less experience than you. So even on the technical front, don't assume that people don't need help. Don't assume that that they are don't assume they have all the answers. Like, be offering help all the time. Um, don't assume that that you can just say once, "Hey, if you need anything, let me know." Meanwhile, I'm going to be here in my corner. Like, no, you have to make it a practice to ask over and over again. We need to have empathy for the producers of that technology, because um, when that happens effectively and you have a really healthy team working together, then chances are you're going to build a great product. And together you'll be able to have empathy for the people who are consumers of the technology that you're using. And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. If we care about each other internally, it creates an environment where it's very possible and achievable to also care deeply about the people using the products that we build. And being a tech lead, again, you're leading the technology, you're not leading the people, but you have to understand how people work. And people are people, So, and we as engineers, it's a little bit harder for us to do it to think that way. Um, don't want to overgeneralize, but most of the time that's true, right? We're very logical people, right? But we have to understand, hey, this is built by people for people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a great takeaway. Especially the point about how I think part of what you're saying is that empathy allows us to be better at perspective taking, especially taking the perspective of others who are at a different skill level than us or just in different situations. And that helps you both be a better technical leader and also understand the consumers of your product better, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. If we create some sensitivities within the team, then we can have some sensitivities that are external to the team as well. This plays out in customer interviews as well. That's one of the things that I expect my tech leads to do. They're working together with their product trio, right? That product manager and that product designer, but they're sitting down with customers all the time to understand um, who it is that's being impacted by the thing that they're building. And that goes such a long way. And again, creating that empathy for the people who are using the things that we do. But then I also want them transferring that context out to to their teammates as well, right? The producers of technology, right? Now again, if other people want to join in the interviews, like, that's totally fine. But we're talking about primary ownership here, right?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so this has all been really wonderful. I think you've offered us some really valuable insights today that I personally will be thinking about day to day in my own job now too. So thank you so much, Sergio, and thank you everybody for watching. And good luck with any upcoming interviews that you may have. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video was valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching and good luck on your upcoming interview.